There we go. Okay, everybody. Well, my name is Christopher Hux Ortiz, and I am a member here of the United We Rise, Every Black Body. And today, what we'll be participating in is the third of a package of 3 sessions. Today's conversation is about the dilemma of Black erasure and how we, as both individuals and as our organizations, um, can navigate some of this. So we'll be having a lot of conversation about what you can do and how we can do it to protect and to take care of the communities that we serve and our organizations as well. So our panelists today will include Dazan Diallo, Maximilian Boykin, so Max, Kenyon Farrow, and Dominique Morgan. Our facilitator for this conversation is Mr. Gary Daffin of the MoCA Center up in Boston. And we look forward to having you. Now, really quickly, if you have any questions, we will be collecting questions and we'll address them at the very end. But if there's anything that you'd like to kind of speak to, just go ahead and put it in the chat. There are several of us monitoring the chat, and that's one way that we'll make sure that we capture all that information and can be able to respond to some of those in the discussion a little bit later on. So I will now introduce my colleague, Mr. Gary Daffin.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I still forget to unmute. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Gary Daffin. I'm the Executive Director at the Multicultural AIDS Coalition, which is one of the members of United We Rise, and was one of the founding members along with the National Black Gay Men's Advocacy Coalition and the National Black Women's HIV/AIDS Network. And you can visit us and learn more about United We Rise at everyblackbody.org. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and all those things. So primarily, United We Rise is a Black-led intersectional collaborative, and our goal is really to reimagine the pathway to end the HIV epidemic while uplifting the health of Black people overall. Our work is grounded in dismantling racism, particularly anti-Black racism that permeates Black life, and we want to engage communities in answering the question that we formatted at the beginning of this group, and that was, what would the response to HIV look like if it was led by Black people? And so that has been kind of the driving question that we ask our folks. So that's what this conversation is about, and particularly addressing what's been happening in the last 6 months. But before we get started, we like to start with a little bit of a grounding exercise, and I want to turn it over to my friend and our colleague here at United We Rise, Daniel Downer. Daniel?
Thank you so much for that, Gary. Hi, everyone. Hey, family. My name is Daniel Downer, pronouns he, him, his, United We Rise committee member or member and organizational culture consultant. So for the last 2, I would say, parts prior to this, we've done a grounding exercise, and I want to do that before we get into this conversation that we are about to have. So I want to invite you to arrive not just into this Zoom, but also within your body, within your spirit, and within your Blackness. You know, wherever you are, make some contact with yourself. That might be touching your shoulder, resting your hand on your chest, or just simply stretching. We're all here, and that's no small thing. And one of the things we've been doing with the previous 2 is bringing in someone with us into this space. So I invite you to call in an ancestor, maybe a beloved, a spirit who has held you up. It could be a church mother, a ballroom icon, maybe it's a movement builder, an HIV warrior, or even family members or friends we've lost too soon. They're not gone. They're actually here within our hands and within our fight, and also within our laughter. And I invite you to say their names silently in your heart, or maybe drop them in the chat if you want to flood this space with their memory. I also want you to invite you to repeat this with me. Maybe it's in your mind or out loud if you're feeling bold, or even in the chat. I am the prayer and the protest. I am the medicine and the fire. I am the child of survivors, conjurers, and builders. I'm not disposable. I am not erased. I'm divine. As we have our conversation, let that truth sit in your bones. And if you're able, let's make some sound, maybe tapping your chest, snapping your fingers, or even giving a good church clap. This is the sound of a people who refuse to be silenced. It's the rhythm of Black life that continues, no matter what they try to take from us. And as we begin this dialogue, carry this knowing with you. May your words be rooted. May your rage be righteous. May your joy be contagious. And may your care be radical. We are the ones our people dreamed of, and we don't need permission to build what we deserve. Thank you so much. Let's get into our conversation today.
Thank you, Daniel. Much needed words of wisdom. So this is, as was said before, the third of a series of conversations that we've been having, entitled "Navigating and Resisting the Dilemma of Black Erasure." And it started out because we wanted to have a space where folks working in the field, Black people working in the field, could come together and talk about what's been happening in the overall political and cultural environment since the beginning of the year. And in our first conversation, we had a talk with folks who were in leadership positions to talk about what it's like to have to be making decisions that bring up a conflict between what we're being asked to do in terms of the government's insistence that we do certain things, and how we maintain our values and our integrity. And the second conversation we had was with some more frontline folks to get a sense of what was really happening on the ground and how people were feeling and how this environment has been affecting people, and how organizations were dealing with those challenges. And for this one, we wanted to have a little bit more proactive, more of an activist, more of a how do we get involved? What are we doing? What do we need to be doing in this moment? And so we invited a really stellar group of folks, most of whom have been involved with United We Rise in some way over the past 5 years since we started back in 2020. So we have Desan Diallo, who's going to be a little bit late. She had an emergency that she had to deal with. And we have Max Boykin, Kenyon Farrell, and Dominique Morgan. And I think we should get started. Let me just ask folks to take a moment and just introduce themselves. So how about Kenyon, you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Kenyon Farrell, he, him pronouns. I'm the communications director with AVAC, and also the board president of the LGBT Center of Greater Cleveland, and a new board member at the Women's March. Glad to be here.
Great. Dominique, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dominique Morgan, she, her, president of Starks and Whitaker Consulting, and I am the co-founder of the T.S. Madison Starter House. Glad to be here today.
Thank you. Good to have you. And Max.
What's up, y'all? Max Boykin, he, him, his pronouns. I am the manager of the Save HIV Funding Campaign, a collaboration between Prep for All, AVAC, which Kenyon mentioned, and HIV Medical Association, with advisement from the Positive Women's Network and the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. And I am also a member of Black South Rising. Shout out to Vanita. Thank y'all.
Great, thanks. Thanks, everybody. So Desan should be jumping on at some point, and if someone can point her out to me in case I forget her. So let's dive into kind of the meat of this conversation, which essentially boils down to the country and the world is a bit fucked up at the moment. So how can we fight back, and what should we be doing? to address what is happening, particularly to Black folks. So one of the questions that we wanted to ask was, you know, what are you seeing out there, and how are you seeing institutions pushing back? How is your institution pushing back against what I think we all can see fairly clearly is an attempt to erase Black folks, all kinds of Black folks, whether immigrants or LGBTQ people or people who work in the government. What what are you what are you seeing as ways that are that you're working against the current culture that your organizations are, and what you see as what's needed? Um, I'm sure we have lots of different opinions. Anybody want to start? Should we, Max, you want to start? I know you're doing a lot.
I never, not necessarily wanted to start, but I'm down to do so. Um, I think we've seen a number of like crappy laws get passed, both on state, local, and federal levels. Mostly what I work on is on the federal level and how in which we are addressing that while talking to members of Congress, encouraging people to have in district meetings and have conversations with their legislators. That starts off with what I consider an escalating set of tactics. Some of these folks within our community haven't had as much time of meeting and talking to legislators. And it doesn't have to start off as some like nice thing. I think it's really just trying to hold them accountable for the votes that they are. It's important to understand from your federal legislators to your state representatives and senators, but also understand who your city council members are, who are the folks that are making state-based decisions and making sure that are that we're if we can vote, that we vote in those different elections, no matter our different party or who we think will be, because we should make sure that our votes are something that we can continue to do. Living in a state that gets a lot of folks kicked off voter rolls on a regular day basis, I think that's an important thing for people to be able to do. But I also think being able to teach folks, I want to shout out to some of our folks in Colorado and some of the other states. Some of the folks are super plugged in with everything that's going on. Then there's other folks that have no idea what's going on. They don't think none of this has anything to do with them. They don't think that these votes are going to impact them on a regular day basis. So it's important to actually go into the community and talk to the folks in the community and have teachings around like, this is how this impacts us. This is what is going on. And we've been able to, share different toolkits and trainings at what we've considered a summer of advocacy for the Save HIV funding campaign, about how in which we continue to get more and more folks to be able to engage around this. This is not a short fight. This is not something that will be real cute and quick. This is a long fight. We're dealing with fascist authoritarian folks on the federal level, but we're also seeing a lot of folks on the state level that have been doing that, especially folks that have been here in the South and also the Midwest that have been seeing those problems. So I think first and foremost, one of the most important things is talking to other folks within your community to be able to engage and go up against the things that are constantly attacking our communities. I think the other thing around that I think is truly important with our ability to be able to do this is to actually confront those folks that make a decision making. When it comes down to funding, that is still on the state legislature side. It's not actually present. It's not actually a lot of other people that we think make those decisions, but it is Congress, and we need to make sure that they're held accountable around this. And I think it's really important for us to be able to, continue democracy in the United States. And for us to do that, we actually have to make sure that these legislators are doing what they're supposed to. And when they're not, holding them accountable, and accountability may not be something that is right now. So I'm gonna let Kenyon talk about this a little bit more, but definitely around doing op-eds or letters to the editor in local newspapers is also something that we've been pushing more and more over the last couple of months to actually continue to hold these different legislators accountable for what they've been doing, the crap votes that they've been putting out there. I think that's something that we have to continue to do as well. And we have to engage folks on the state and local level while we're also doing the federal level. I want to, shout out to Alicia McKinley Beach and Daniel Driffin, who've been doing these local community pieces in the Atlanta metro area, raising some of the concerns, but also allowing people to dream on what is possible for us to actually end the HIV epidemic in the Atlanta metro area, while there's a lot of bull that's going on with some of the health departments. So being able to, bring in community from different voices to be able to say like, no, this is what we're actually wanting to do and plan out, even with big grants being cut, other things being done is to, continue to bring community together to dream what's possible. So I think that's one of the most important things, but also holding our legislators accountable to the crappy decisions that they're making right now.
Yeah, Kenyon, just picking up on what Max is saying, he's talked a lot about the political work that needs to be done. But I'm wondering if what you're saying and how you think we need to be continuing to educate folks in the community, because it does feel like a lot of people do not know what's happening, or really understand what's happening, both in terms of the HIV world, but also the broader context of what's happening to Black folks. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what we can be doing, what people can be doing to to really educate folks about what is happening in this moment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think you know, I think is one beginning to kind of just make space if you are you know, in an organization you know, of any sort, particularly, you know, community-based organizations. I think just creating the containers for people to be able to talk and hear kind of what's going on. So you know, for instance, at the LGBT Center Greater Cleveland a couple months ago, we had kind of created like a town hall meeting for, you know, queer and trans folks in the city to just be able to hear kind of what was happening at the federal level and what we were anticipating at the local level, how it was going to impact folks. And we actually ended up having to move the venue because it was the registrants was bigger than the space that we had, and we ended up having it in a. It was going to be at the LGBT Center. We ended up moving it to a hall, and it was packed. I want to say it was like 350 people or something who turned out, which is hard to do in Cleveland for a political issue. And so I think it's just kind of holding those kind of spaces, giving people opportunities to plug into like actual work from that space. So one, you know, obviously giving people the tools to kind of understand the situation, but giving people directly, this organization is leading this particular set of actions, join them, right? Like making those very clear links so that it goes beyond just the sort of information, but giving people ways to kind of channel their energy. I think also just creating, you know, social media or sharing other people's social media who are either you know, demonstrating or talking about the kind of specifics of what's happening with you know, a particular kind of analysis, or you know, just kind of creating your own. And so I think um and those things actually move. I think it's one of the things that, you know, has been a lot in the discussion around the failure of the Democratic Party is you know, not relying on, and this is true for our organizations as well, like it can't just be like getting an op-ed in the New York Times. That's great, like fabulous, congrats, those things will reach a particular set of people, but if you really want to engage and ultimately mobilize and organize communities, you need to speak to people in different kinds of platforms and venues that people are actually, regular folks are actually using. And so I think those are some of the things that are particularly effective, or that I'm seeing kind of work in terms of helping, you know, build a you know, a base of folks to then to move a strategy.
Yeah, definitely. So Dominique, what are you what are you seeing out there that's working in terms of how people are engaging, and what you think we can be doing to really mobilize folks a little bit more to understand what's happening?
I don't feel like we know what's working, because I feel like we're like
That's true.
in the things. Like I think that is and I'm adjacent to everything right now. Like one of my big clients is NASM, right? And then we have the starter house work, but then, you know, just existing in community in general, you have friends who are losing their jobs. You know, you have it's at all of these intersections, and I think it's difficult to define what's working when the intention of keeping information from folks while having this blitz of attack is taking place. So what I see is folks are going forward. Folks are still yet hanging on. What I'm afraid of, and so I guess I will answer from what I hope we come to when we figure out what works, is that we don't go to the pattern of 2020, 2021, and 2022, because there's a great deal of folks who cannot survive it again. We lost people, although people are still on this earth. We lost folks in the last 5 years because of how we did that. And I think that also realizing like the modality, I think that we have to come out of some of the elitism we've grown to have when it comes to having these discussions. You might have to really have the conversation with somebody randomly on Grindr because they say the thing, and you might need to just be able to drop that information. You might, the TikTok, situation, like these things that are happening, like what is working is people are talking, and they're not talking perfectly, because I think it's hard to talk perfectly about something that's very unknown, very scary, and can evolve within the second, but they are talking. People aren't being silent. The last thing I will say is I think there's a version of working that are folks who are public health system adjacent facing and working for the layperson. And there's a lot of agencies who are trying to get along because that's how it has to work for them right now. It may not feel as rambunctious as we want it to be, or it may feel like they're just going with the flow. And also it's working if you want to if you want to break up the pavement and you want to throw some rocks. Like everybody's version of going forward is working right now because we don't know the ultimate answer. And so I hope that we continue to foster that even if it makes you uncomfortable and not the way you would do it, you stand back and let people do it how they have to do it, as long as they're still doing something, because it's very easy to shut down right now.
Right. Yeah, that seems to have been, I think, a lot of people's initial response was to shut down, and basically throw their hands up and feel like, what can we do? I guess it would be good if we could maybe, Max, talk a little bit more specifically about what's been happening in the HIV world in terms of the fight to, I mean, we want to talk about what's happening in the community, but I think people do need to understand kind of what has actually been happening with respect to funding, and the field in general, and how people have been responding.
I think we understand that there's been, especially on the right, that this coalition around whatever Trump says and whatever Trump wants, he can get, and they will capitulate and move forward in whatever way they want to, and they will make a big grand gesture out of it at times, but in many times that they do move forward in that way. Um, we also understand that he ain't no king. And part of the reason I live in the United States is not to have one. And one of the things is to make sure that legislators are actually held accountable. So we've had many people hosting in-district meetings throughout this time, but we've also, and we partnered with, of course, AIDS United around AIDS Watch. And then there have been others like HIV EMA and others that have hosted different advocacy days throughout the spring going into the summer, and letting legislators know. And we've also seen drastic cuts to the international or global HIV funds. But shout out to the many folks that were calling the legislators and doing all of that work to be able to grasp some of the global funds around PEPFAR back and take that out of the rescissions package. We also understand they have to be visual around future rescissions packages, and to understand there's like three major pieces. There's rescissions that takes away the money that has already been allocated. There was well, we are about to go through and are continuously going through appropriations, which is fiscal year 26 in the future, money that is continuously under threat. And that is also what we will continuously be talking to legislators about moving forward. And then when they talk about the big ugly bill, that didn't cut necessarily HIV funding, but we did know that it made drastic cuts to Medicaid happening post 2026. And one of the big things is we know a lot of people living with HIV are need the Medicaid support, but also many of our people in our families and support, and people that are not people living with HIV also still need Medicaid and need those SNAP benefits and other benefits that have been cut. And that disproportionately impacts all of our communities. And a lot of them won't feel or see those cuts for a year or two, but when it starts to come in, it's going to come in really hard. And also I live in Georgia. I'm from Georgia. One of the things that we very much understand is the work requirements that are going to come in is going to kick even more people off over the next couple of years. And that's one of the scariest things. And it's not really a work requirement, it's a job loss penalty. And that's something that we have to really reframe and think about how we also reframe the language that the right uses and actually tell our folks what the hell it is. Right. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be important just moving forward and continuing and thinking about is like we have to break down, as Dominique was saying, we got to break down this language that any layperson can get and understand what's going on. I was like, hey, these benefits are about to be cut off. And that's why the community teach-ins, doing the work that I brought up that Alicia and Daniel are doing here in Atlanta, knowing that folks are doing them across the country. Those are the important pieces of getting more and more folks involved, understanding how they can actually push back against these cuts. I also think it's important for certain organizations to call a spade a spade. I'm also, this is some certain organizations, this has come up in the campaign before, while certain organizations did not like how other organizations were moving. We're going a little bit harder on some of the elected officials. And I tell them, one, I'm a police abolitionist, so I'm not about policing nobody's how they moving. But important it is, as Dominic said, I'm gonna allow however you come into this to be able to show that type of action and to be able to show up. If you're gonna be calling your legislators, you're gonna be the ones to be able to set up the meetings in DC, great. But if you're also the one that's a local clinic, but you got some folks that are fed up and tired of this and want to go protest outside of one of those legislators' offices, or want to focus more on teaching more folks how and what they need to be actually done in order to be able to change elections in the future, I'm going to encourage all of those efforts because I think it's all of important for what we want to be able to see for the future of the HIV movement as we continue to see these cuts from the right. Our folks are actually coming together more and more to be able to push back against it. But we are also, and I'll say this from a lot of feedback I got from HINAC and some of the other conferences I've had a chance to go to was people are having struggles with their planning, their Ryan White planning councils. And being able to be able to call out what the problem. There's a lot of people that are scared, they don't know what's going on, and they feel like a lot of the councils aren't taking up what is needed for people living with HIV to understand everything that's going on. And it doesn't, they're trying to continue to move, business as usual, where clearly business ain't gonna be usual anytime soon.
And no shade. I also want to acknowledge for the person that can show a girl how to get their pay stubs together so they can stay on their Ryan White. For the I don't know who's on this call, but y'all had me here and ain't nobody gave me no honorarius, so I'm gonna say what I want to say for the hour and 30 minutes. For the people who can show people how to beat the system right now, the caveats that were there and the things that allowed people to have a level of income and stay on their hop wall, all of that allowed you to build a foundation of life before they pushed you out of the supportive systems is gone. So also like the hood educators, the folks that'll help a girl figure out how to, if you're a case manager and you can pass somebody an extra pantry, those type of things are really important right now. Well, we always knew the frontline people were important and the way that they engage with activism. But currently, if we got folks, at City Hall, we got folks who are writing the legislation, we got folks who are marching. We also need the folks who are doing that one-on-one piece of, girl, don't tell them that you make over this dollar. Like, be honest and be honest in the spirit of we have to dismantle this from the inside out, and humans beat systems. And I think for managers and leaders in organizations, create space and safety for your staff to center people more than systems right now.
Yeah, that's an important thing, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, the Medicaid cuts, people don't understand what that means. What it means is you're going to be kicked off. So it's exactly what you're saying, that we got to teach people like how to make sure you get your shit together so that you say the right thing and go show up when you need to. And we have to figure out other people in our organizations that can help people do that. Because we do it for Ryan White, and we need to figure out how we can do it for Medicaid. So, and another thing that I'm hearing is kind of the old school good cop, bad cop. Like we can't, everybody, somebody has to make a fuss, have a riot, even as others of us are trying to figure out how to work within the system. Kenyon, I'm wondering if anything comes to mind to you from what you've been hearing.
I mean, yeah, what I think is we have to, I think to Dominique's and Max's point, you know, where the social services and like helping people get like just their needs met is really, really critical. And I think one of the things that has been a challenge in terms of how a lot of our kind of, you know, HIV service organizations are set up or how they function is actually sometimes to in I think in an effort to protect quote unquote their clients will actually dissuade people from participating in certain kinds of activism. And I think like we have to move past that. I mean, we should have long moved because we didn't get none of this shit without people kicking in doors and you know throwing ashes on White House lawns and stuff like that. But you know, so I think that this is the time I think that organizations I think have to really think not both. I think the service provision is important. I think the kind of traditional kind of policy advocacy is important. And I think also helping, you know, for, you know, clients and folks who are, you know, interested in participating in other forms of either resistance or how to help other folks is also important. You know, one of the things I'm seeing a lot here in Cleveland is people like informal kind of networks, and there's a couple organizations involved, but people really like helping people. I'm seeing it a lot, particularly in the immigration space, but people are just housing people who are you know, scared of ICE or you know, who feel like they're being directly threatened. And I'm, you know, just on a couple of, you know, chains of text messages and stuff that's literally like helping people kind of move about and either get housing, who has a spare room, who has this, that, or whatever as one. So I think some of that stuff has to be in the mix. But I think one of the but I think that a challenge that we have, I think in the HIV space in general is a lot of our, you know, organizations who I think rightly, particularly in southern states, are more kind of right-wing places, some of whom I know directly have actually been attacked for taking different kinds of policy stances. You know, so their, you know, state funding has been cut, you know, under, you know, bullshit for bullshit reasons. I'm not saying that the retaliation isn't possible, but and hasn't happened. People don't have a real reality of that. But I also think that you know, it's a moment that I think we have to not use our organizations as a kind of to gatekeep people away from participating in movements in the way that they choose to or see as necessary.
I think one thing that I could just say, each of the entities that I've worked for in HIV space has always had an advocacy space for clients or for folks that are engaging within their work, be it Illinois ASAP, be it Black Treatment Advocates Network. But I also know many entities that do not have that space for their clients, for the spaces. If you have a space where your clients can also chill, they should also have a space where they can also get advocacy and understand what's going on. Being able to have those updates, I think that is an important piece, so they can understand what's going on with them, and also just so because also I know there's like some truth of like certain agencies worried about the closing of their organization. It is not okay for your clients not to know what is actually going on
Right.
around with that work. We need to make sure that our folks know understand that also so they can know what they need to do if they need to tell their story more or if they also, you know, need to shift some around in their life. So I think that is an important piece to let and to continue to make sure folks are updated and understand the advocacy efforts that's going on as well.
I think the informed decision piece is so important. From what Max is saying, like let people choose how they engage. And if you're a leader of an organization and it's like, yo, we got to move like this right now to get through, figure out how you explain that to community. I think another mistake that we made early in the pandemic is that folks kind of lived in the crystal castles and they made these big decisions because we felt like it was all on us. And then community, the folks that we were positioned to serve, they didn't understand why that, and you may tell them everything and they may still not live for it. But a lot of folks are having perceptions of the work of the people leading the work that doesn't really reflect the intention because of the climate. And it's far worse now with the retaliation. I also want to name that our love with hiring directly impacted people means that we also have to hold how you may work there and you're not a, you're not a 50c, you don't have a component of your org where you can be you can engage in policy work, but also how are you supporting your staff in how they can engage in their personal time, because they're fighting for their own livelihood at times, or they may not be directly impacted by the issue that your organization engages in, but they're rooted in community in a way that the ED often is not. Somebody's pulling up on them at the bar when they're trying to have a little sip of juice. How do you engage in a way that doesn't mean on Monday you're having to deal with HR? Like the the least we can do is remove the fear of speaking up for our people. And I think that is a trade-off of being a leader. Just because you feel that at the top doesn't mean that you need to let that permeate throughout your organization.
Yeah, I know we have a program at MAC that's LGBTQ Elders of Color. And one of the things that we found from them is that people are really wanting to be engaged, particularly people who are old enough to have who lived through the HIV movement. They feel like they want to be engaged, like you're saying. They want to be able, they want to know what's happening, and want to be able to advocate. And so I wonder if there are other, I mean, are there ways that we can how what what populations, what communities do we need to get to, and how do we get to them is I think one question that we should be figuring out. And I think the idea of, you mentioned that we need the idea of, I think you said hood educators. That is kind of seems to me to be a major challenge that we have of really getting information across to people in a way that they understand and will be motivated. And I'm just wondering if people have more thoughts about, what we can actually do to reach folks.
Be outside. I think that's like one of the more important pieces of it is, as Dominique said, like the ivory towers are cute, but that's not where the folks at. And we gotta go outside and where people are. And that means, going strip clubs, parties, going up on Piedmont Ave. It means going to Edgewood in Atlanta. It means having some of those like harder conversations in places where folks aren't having them. It means also going to the trap. It means actually going to those spaces to be able to have a conversation. It doesn't mean that you go in with the first thing of like, yeah, this is what's going on in DC and you need to care about that. I tried that with a conversation with a friend a couple days ago and it went trash, right? Like it didn't go nowhere. She was like, "This ain't got nothing to do with me," and this all these other things. But then you start to break it down. You really understand. You got to hit them and understand what are the things that are important to people. The money coming out of people's pockets is something that definitely important to them. But I also think the other big piece of that is, understand people's access to healthcare and not just their healthcare, it's also their family's healthcare. When you start talking about SNAP benefits and other things, and Medicaid, you're not just talking about them. You're talking about potentially their kids, their family, their mom, their dad. Like you're talking about the whole family structure, about how a lot of these folks are also being able to like, stay where they're at, move the way that they're able to move. And so I think that's important. I've always like, hitting up your favorite pusher man, letting them know what's going on, so they can also let other folks know. I think it's important for our ability to make sure folks are knowing what's going on. But it's always important. I want to say like shout out to PWN, the people living with HIV, people living with HIV caucus, because as you said, people aging with HIV have been some of the biggest ones to call us out and say, well, we need to do more, telling us the different actions that we need to take and listening to, because they're the ones that are most in tune. And they're also the ones that are going, to some of these Ryan White planning councils and others of saying like, this is what we're hearing, this is what we're not hearing. In some of these spaces. And they're also some of the ones that are most likely, shout out to Latanya, also here in Atlanta, who also does some of that outreach at like different sex parties and others, of just making sure that like folks know what's going on. I think those are really important spaces to continue to do outreach in, to continue to talk about it. It don't look like the same thing that we do during the day all the time, but I think all of those are really important spaces to continue to engage the informal economy. Uh, as we got a crook in leading the White House. So, you know, I don't know what is quote unquote crooked or not crooked, but the folks that are engaging in our economy, keeping our people alive, especially with a lot of these things being cut, are going to be some of the important people to engage around this and talk to them, but also allow them to also have their voices and, like I said, be outside and be where people are.
Mhm. Anyone else?
I think also making sure that there's funds associated with people doing this type of movement work. I think, you know, something I always think about, if we can feed people, you don't get people in the room, right? If we can figure out how to make sure that we can support the sex workers who are sitting out here educating people on FetLife, like like how do we make sure that they're supported at a time like now, so we can ensure that they're a part of this in the long run. I think it's also important for us to figure out a way to have this conversation that doesn't spark fear. Like, fear should not be the gasoline right now, but clear and expansive information, I think, is super important right now. And I don't think we do. I don't think we do that well. Of course, this is someone delivering flowers to me at the worst time. We don't do that well. And I think about, like, SOS is coming up here in Atlanta in August. I think that's such a great time to figure out how we like bring that intersection of community on the ground folks with, like, structural leaders, and how do we build information that has dexterity, not dumbing it down, but making it more expansive and making it feel like a weapon everybody can utilize.
Mhm. I have a question about partners in this game. Particularly, I don't know, are people having, what's your experience with the public health system right now, like the state and local and even federal, actual people in the government? My sense is that they're as upset or a little bit lost as people out in the community and wanting to do something, and not willing to tell you what to do, but uh, acknowledging that you might have to do things that you can't tell them about. So I'm just wondering if people are, I mean, are you hearing, are you interacting with uh, either people who are managing grants or policy? You know, what are you experiencing out there with the, you know, with the system, if you will?
Well, I'll say first, I think that a missed opportunity to me when, you know, this new administration kicked off after January 20th is, you know, really organizing a lot of the, you know, government workforce through their labor unions to respond to this moment, right? I think so. The fact, so to me, like that, there was not after Doge entered the first building, there should have been a way to organize those workers with tactics on how to like deal with that as a situation, right? Like everybody should have pulled out their phone and went live when Doge showed up at the door, right? Or everybody should have picked up every laptop in the building and walked the fuck out, right? Like think like to me that's a those are tactics that I feel like the public sector union should have been like organizing their membership to do in those cases. I think now what I'm, you know, one of the places I'll just say kind of, you know, at AVAC, one of the things that we've worked on with some other groups is working with some of the NIH funded researchers who are, you know, in you know, at the various like research institutions. And you know, and so one of the things, you know, we did was to do, you know, kind of a workshop, and we were encouraging people, we you know no resources to kind of organize it ourselves, but trying to get some of the researchers like have your own town hall meetings about what these cuts mean, not just to the research in HIV, which of course those are important, but what that loss of money means to that city, right? The one I keep using is, University of Alabama, Birmingham, right? The tens of maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars that like that research institution brings into Birmingham, not just through the research dollars, but breaking stuff down into, well, what happens when, people are not coming to town for meetings, right? That's flights, that's Uber and taxi rides, that's catering, that's potentially dry cleaning, like all the things that people use in that system, right? All of those businesses get impacted while people may not care so much about, the latest prep study or whatever is happening, from the research vantage point. So I think like one of the things that I think some of the government, especially kind of in our field, I think has to, people can, just even host those kinds of things to really explain to people like not only the impact on that particular, but then also the ancillary people, because people just only see the researchers, but those are research assistants, those are admin assistants, like regular folks who live in those, who are making, basic working class salaries working for those institutions, who are losing jobs because the research money is going. And so I think we have to start drawing those connections a lot more, into terms of how these things kind of are impacting, at the local level. And I also think that, again, that I think that some of the uh, public sector unions, I think, still need to figure out some strategies to actually mobilize their base on how to deal with Doge or these various kinds of government interventions that are happening when demands for data or other kinds of things are happening in real time.
I think a lot of the girls are gagged because they're realizing that tokenism won't protect them. There are people who spent 20 years to get in those roles, and that was they wanted to do good. They wanted, and I think want to do good work, but there was a perceived level of protection there. There was a perceived level of access and privilege of knowledge, and I think that is a component where these folks are in a position where they really don't know what's happening, where they feel powerless, and not the level of power acquiescing that they knew they would have to give to go into government or go into some of those spaces, like a new level that that they're not used to experiencing. Also, I think that like within these spaces, like no one is talking about the grief of this right now, and not the grief of like programs, but so much of the solutions and so much of the innovation is literally on the back and bodies of Black folks. And to think about the folks who were part of the HIV vaccine trials and all of the hope that is there. And to, I see Lewis and I'm just like, okay, I know what's happening with the work, but what about the person and the people who have been a part of these pieces? Um, I I don't know how we move forward without like holding space for that grief through all of these sectors. And I don't know, again, the healers have been working overtime, it feels like, for the last 5 years. So I feel like it's a ridiculous ask to like tap back in again. But I don't know what that looks like. And I just bring up the grief piece, and also incarcerated people, the Bureau of Prisons folks, like we're not getting any information. What's happening to the people at Alligator Alcatraz who need support and educate? Y'all hiring these COs for $40 an hour, and they don't know they mouth from their butt, so they clearly can't be in there giving education, right? Like those pieces in the government space, I haven't heard people talk about incarceration, the Bureau of Prisons, PREA, how we navigate that in this time. So systems that were already built around silence before the power of their silence was ran by the administration, how I feel like we're going to leave behind people who are incarcerated while they are increasing that number exponentially every day.
I just, to add to that, I think it is hard for folks in the health department, but we've always, as I've seen some of the comments, there's been a lot of struggle with work with the health departments in general. I'm actually going to Mississippi this weekend to help facilitate a conversation at the ATE University around some of the miscommunication and distrust from community with working with the health departments. And it don't matter if you're in a blue state, red state, wherever. There's a lot of problems with how in which folks have been moving, how in which things haven't or have not been decided, and how in which we decide like where we put trust in those spaces. We do have a couple, I can say this as a person, we've done some press conferences and others where there's been some folks at the training centers, some of those that have been in the health departments that are telling like it is and the real struggles that they're having. There's also people that are so afraid for their job they ain't gonna say nothing to nobody until they get fired. Um, but I also want to talk about something like just like my campaign does not work without partnership in general, with a number of different organizations being able to like show up and work together. And I also, in the first meeting that we had, I knew that not everyone trusted or liked each other in that room. There's a lot of distrust between organizations and the way in which we work. I think it is important to take time to build that trust with one another to be able to fight, the real villains in the room. We may have some individual beefs, we may have some problems or on how different ways in which we have worked in the past. And I'm not going to say that we are going to firm over or get through any of all those problems. But we understand that there is a greater threat, and that greater threat needs some. We got to come together in a real way to be able to push back against that. And I was like, I think about Fred Hampton. It was like we don't fight fire with fire, we fight fire with water. And we can't fight super capitalistic, overarching, fascist thoughts with doing our own individualistic systems. It actually has to be a robust togetherness of working together, from folks that we can still trust in the health departments to folks in different organizations that we can talk to. But it also does have to come from the grassroots of folks really like pushing it out. And if we aren't listening to that, we're gonna continue to fail and struggle. But if we actually are galvanizing and bringing all our people together, I think we see big shifts coming up over the next couple of years. And I do think that means working with other people around in the larger public health outside of HIV. It means working with larger Black community. I think it works with communities that don't always just look like us. And I do think it means especially working with other communities of colors and some of the folks who think that they were big Trump supporters, but understand they've been understand disproportionately attacked. It is not our job to just judge everyone for the votes that and the things and decisions they made. It is important in the thing as an organizer is to continue to bring more and more folks in. And if we're not doing that, then we are not actually bringing the folks in. And I'm gonna stop talking because just Big Dog just came on, so I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let Tazon say something.
Hi, Dazon. Welcome. How are you?
Um, I'm gonna be fine. I came on this call because I can look at every picture and I know just about everybody here. And I needed to be with my other family right now. We just finished talking with the palliative care team, and we're gonna be bringing my father home because there's nothing else. But comfort and love and dignity. And so with that, I'm okay. It's just everything isn't all right until it's whatever comes next. And I'm grateful my mom is here.
Hi,
Say hi,
Mom.
mommy. Say hi. They see you. Yeah. She's talking to my brother. So, I'm here. What am I supposed to say, Max? I heard Max hand it over to me just like that.
I
No, what
Yeah, we just
good.
seen you and just wanted to send you love as well, Dazon.
Well, thank y'all. And I'm grateful for this conversation that y'all are having. There was another wonderful conversation that Alicia McKinley Beach led earlier today, where we could talk about what's next and what HRSA needs to hear from all of us. And so, look, what y'all talking about?
We are talking about a lot.
I
So,
bet.
well, I mean, we were talking, this series has been about, you know, navigating Black erasure, and looking at how, both resilience, trying to stay afloat, run organizations, keep things running, but also resist what's happening. And so we've been talking about how we do that
Yeah.
collectively. And different aspects of what needs to be happening. We've had conversations with, with some CEO folks, with field folks, and people who are closer to the field. And now we want this conversation is more about like what can we actually do, and how do we
Yeah.
work together, and things like that. So feel free to jump in at any point. Max,
Right.
I just go ahead.
Got three things for you because I'm gonna hop back off
Okay.
because we haven't we haven't been back in the room yet. So three things. One is it's about how we use this as an opportunity to change our own mindset.
Mhm.
And there are a couple of things about that mindset that I think we need to affect. One is that in this work, this may, let me back up. First is history. Let's have a Sankofa moment. That's what I'm going to do. So first is knowing where we've been. Where we've always been is that prior, post-slavery or enslavement, and let's remember that too. I heard this quote the other day. The slavery is the white man's history. Liberation is the Black history. So that's the first place where we have to start. And when we look at um, what liberation has always looked like, it has always been about us taking care of us, no matter what everything else, no matter who else was there to help, no matter who else was there to stand in allyship, no matter who else was there in solidarity, it was always about us leading our way. Um, and there's some names we know, and there's some names we don't know, but we need to invoke all of them all the time because those freedom fighters and those freedom leaders are in all of us. And we don't always remember that because everything put in front of us puts us at each other and pitting organizationally, individually, community wise, it doesn't matter geographically. So that's the first one is from whom we come and who they are in us. The second one is let's embrace and learn from that, right? How did we get a Black Wall Street? How did we get all of those things? And even though he was wrong for all the reasons he was coming at it, the Black Republican who got in trouble for trying to say that life was better for Black folks during Jim Crow, he said that badly. He said that really badly. But what he was saying, which is true, is that when we were left with nothing but our own selves, we handled each other, we handled our business. And I think that that's a lot of what we're sitting with, right? In terms of we can't erase us, we ain't going to erase us, and we're not going to allow that to happen. And we're not going to allow any of our own try to erase us. And so we have to continue to call that out wherever that is. And I know the calling in culture. I'm a part of calling in. Some of this shit needs to be called out regularly, consistently, appropriately, and targetedly. And then the third thing is we've got to take some serious action to hold those of us who do have resources, who do have means, who do have the contacts, who do have the connections, who do have the ability to affect decisions that affect our lives, that we hold their feet to a fire that they have not held, felt, or seen before. There's too much money in the Black community in this country for us to say that nobody's doing something for us. There's just too much. There are too many resources that we have brought, that we have created, that we have built, that should be ours, that we still have to fight for. And then the last thing comes back to the mindset for me is there was no one before us. We are the original people. We own humanity in all of its glory and godforsakenness. And so, in that regard, let us all stand and own our rightful place. We are the original people. We are not the resilient people. We are the resistant people. And so, it is with that knowledge and with that sentiment, I will continue to stand in resistance to whatever the nonsense is because the democracy that we have all hoped for and worked for That is it is not perfect. We know what should be perfect, and no one else is going to craft that perfection better than us. No one's going to do it better than us. Nobody has committed ourselves to it more than we and have been the least of those to benefit from it. So that aspirational part to what is resistance is what's going to help us continue to build and save ourselves and save our people. We ain't got time to wait for the election. We don't have time um, to wait for the next benevolent grant. What are we doing for ourselves? What's our own um, what is the collective side hustle for Black folk to get our health together and to make sure that our organizations survive? Innovate. What does that look like? Um, Revamp, revitalize. I don't know what word it is, but think future and live in the present. We've got to build things that last. And thinking as a nonprofit ain't going to get us there. Thinking as people who are victims or who've been oppressed, that's not going to get us there either. Centering ourselves in our own power and not accepting the marginalization narrative is what's going to get us there. I want to just call it out. Dominique, I'm following you. Y'all know I'm just a TikTok scroller and troller. I don't know what you call it. But all I know is every time I flip and Dominique is on, she is giving us the business. She is giving hell. It could even be just ratchet bullshit. And she is still giving the hell to it because that's how we have to bring it. Kenya, you've been very polite, but at the same time, you've also been very informative and very direct. And I think we need to all be supporting each other to do a lot more of that. Max, I don't know if you have a regular TikTok presence. I'll find you if you do. But I'm saying to all of us, supporting each other's work, showing up for each other's work, spending money with each other, giving to each other, donating to each other, um, sending information when you know that there's resources, bringing up the names of organizations that may fit within a donor's profile better than you or more collaboratively than we've been before. These are some of the strategies and tactics. And we don't have to tell everybody what we're doing. We don't have to tell anybody else what we're doing because that too can be our downfall. So those are the thoughts that are random out of my head right now. And that and the fact that I love, 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 thank you, Gary, that y'all are holding this conversation and keeping this conversation going. I can't wait till we do it in person soon, somewhere. And and on top of all of that, what my doctor told me the other day was there are 4 things I want to tell you. Woosah, my clinician said this. Woosah, water, walking, and weights. Goodbye. That's literally what she said to me. So let's keep lifting the uh what do you call it? The figurative and the literal weights. Let's walk for our health and for our collaborative togetherness. Let's make sure we stay hydrated. Give me water. Okay, that's a reference to Tyler. And of course, we must make sure we woosah. Thank y'all. I thank y'all. I thank y'all. I thank
Thank you. That was what we needed. Um, you take care of yourself. We all love you, of course. And we do hope we see you in person soon. And we will be in touch. Thank you. Well, that was a very nice keynote speech for our session. But it also brings us to the next, what I was actually going to bring up next, which is um, how do we need to think about collaboration now and how we work together? Because I think we all know, like over the past, I mean, 10 years at least, but a lot of, if not most, Black run HIV specific organizations disappeared over the course of a while. And obviously we don't want that to happen now. again, rather with the organizations that are still strong. But I think it's, as Dezan was saying, we've got to figure out like, what do we do? How do we work? How do we work together? How do we use what we have to strengthen what we have and to grow? And I'm just wondering if people have thoughts about how we might reimagine the way that we do work. I mean, one of the things that United We Rise is thinking about is how do we reimagine the path to an end of HIV? And certainly what's been happening in this country is forcing us to do that if we weren't already thinking about it. So I'm just wondering if people have ideas about what real collaboration would look like, or different ways of thinking, or dreaming or imagining how we.
This is Dominic Morgan. I think in the face of a lot of funding being taken, it means that people won't be clamoring to be in charge so they can have the grant coming to them first. And in that spirit, I think it's an opportunity for us to get to the table with a spirit of kind of equity and really figuring out who's going to do what part. Because I think that if everyone is trying to do the same thing at once, the forward movement we're going to need is not going to happen. It sounds like we need folks who are going to be focused on learning and education and making sure that that is built in a multitude of modalities, and more folks than not can engage with it. We need folks who are saying, we got government and we're going to be policy at these levels so we can have this language. We need folks who are organizing the organizers. There's a generation of organizers who have loved TikTok, but those activists on TikTok are full of shit. They have no body of work, and you can't tell if you think that new 20-something that works at your organization that you can't tell them nothing, baby, try talking to one of these children on TikTok who will sit there and quote a line from Miss Major while I am sitting next to Miss Major. These kids will play on your time. So making sure that we really, whatever, we're laying out all the areas we need to address and who's going to do it and who's going to hold that piece. I've been saying to folks for a while, even thinking about like Pasha and all these other pieces, like, how do we make sure that work happens, that making sure the government never owns these pieces again? They've showed us that they can't be good stewards, and they're not safe for us to build answers with that way. Yes, there's funding associated with it, but we see how flimsy and how this is an abusive relationship, right? This is an abusive relationship that we have the opportunity to really come out of. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. But that's what I am trying to focus on here with the starter house. And, talking with, there are days that I'm sitting on the phone with T.S. Madison until 3 a.m. now. Sister Craig can't be saying that shit on that show because the kids is like, how do we do that? But also talking to the girls and making sure that they feel informed. I'm writing girls inside. If the Black and Pink newsletter isn't going in, I'm printing things off. But let's really take this opportunity that feels like they destroyed us to look at it as we have the chance to build a stronger house on a more sturdy foundation that we own as much as we can, knowing the spaces we work with and some of the witchcraft we have to engage in when it comes to dollars and systems. But this is a beautiful chance of not starting over, but refresh and implementing our knowledge and making sure that we bring in more people than we're kind of leaving behind. Oh, and this is also the chance for Butch Queens to be a little bit quiet.
So I'll mute.
This is also the chance, the girls have been talking about radical rest. Sometimes God answers prayers in awkward ways. So, maybe the girls can sit down a little bit. And take the trans girls off the front line and give them a office door with a code on it, huh?
Amen. So I was gonna say, so I think one of the things that we need to do, I think we need to ask ourselves, are we a black? I'll just say it. Are we a Black liberation movement that focuses on HIV, or are we HIV advocates who happen to be Black? And I think those are two very different things. And so, and so it's part of informed, and it's something that I'm kind of coming back to myself. Kind of having come into HIV work from doing other things, other kinds of movement work, and so, which has been sometimes hard because I've always felt a little like an underdog and a little bit of an outsider in this space, which might seem weird to people, to, um, but that's sort of the reality of it for me. I've come to a place now where I'm like, well, I don't give a fuck, right? Like, like I'm going to, do the work that I see is important and how I see it's important. And I say that to say that I think that it's this question, I think what Gary, you asked earlier about kind of connection and thinking about kind of other movements and spaces, because I was thinking about it, when Dominique mentioned, Alligator Alcatraz and these other pieces, because it's, I think about the fact that, we don't have in other sort of, there's been a history of like counter recruitment, right? In terms of keeping people from joining the military, keeping counter recruitment that like folks were involved in, particularly in the 80s and early 90s, in terms of like how you transition people who were joining uh, uh, pro-Nazi, white supremacist militia organizations in the 80s and 90s, that people had strategies to actually get people out of those institutions, right? And we don't have as much of that work happening anymore. But I think it's like those are some of the kind of things that I think we as folks who have been kind of more specifically working in HIV have to start, I think, thinking about what's our relationship to this entire system and what's our relationship to the other kinds of work that happen that are about changing the system, that create the conditions to which our people have uh, predisposed to HIV diagnoses anyway. And yeah, to me, that's where my head is these days.
I just want to add, and I know there's some more questions in the chat. We got to have more of the YNs in the meetings. We got to have more of them around. We got to have them a part of it and a part of the advocacy space. I always, I want to thank it was like shout out to Kenyon, shout out to Charles Stevens, shout out to all them like for pouring into me when I first started when I was young and gave me more of the fuck it attitude that I've continued to move forward with. But I think you need more of that. You need more of a just impressing on young folks, but not always telling them what to do and telling them like, oh, this is wrong. How you moving? I managed a bunch of them last year. And I understood it was just as a learning experience for me, and understanding everything that they were also going through, how in which they were communicating and how they moved things. There are certain things that we just not can't, but none of this works. None of our movement changes. Nothing if we don't have them also in taking the front lines, doing the hard work, and allowing some of the folks that have been doing it for a while to take a break. But this is not the time to take these long extended sabbaticals and others. I support folks doing so. I support folks doing it in different ways. But I think it's also really important as someone I used to work with a lot, and called me. He's like, hey, yeah, I know I've taken it, taken a seat, and I was just gonna see what everyone was gonna do. Black women have done so much work right now. I'm gonna sit back on this one, but also understanding, they still gonna come for us. And some of the people that have lost the most jobs under this particular time have been Black women. And we understand why he's, attacking those particular threads. We know why he's going after certain communities. There's a reason he goes after transgender communities right now, and it's a way to be able to move up their base, to have more strength for their base and less power for us. It is important for us to be able to understand how we also are connecting in all those ways and doing it in as Dominique has said, in a partnership that comes from the grassroots, but also we can't just leave out other people. It has to be done in a real equity base, and we do it in our own way. And I think it also means calling out some of the organizations and different organizations that do have more of the money, that do have more of the space, that don't necessarily look like us, to be able to redistribute some of that wealth and how in which they're moving, to make sure that happening. And if you are in the South, and you are, looking to have some of those conversations, because we also know there's been this big initiative that is leaving a lot of the work in the South, and you have some conversations you want to talk more about that, and also talk more as I'm also a member of Black South Rising. A. Tony Young said it in our first conversation we had a couple months ago, was like, some people gonna have to think about how we moving together, how we consolidating. That's going to be an important thing that we have to do moving forward. And if you want to be a part of some of those conversations, definitely reach out to Vanita and myself about some of those conversations that will be happening throughout the rest of this year, to talk about how we bolden up some of the folks that are doing some of the great work together, while also thinking about how we move certain folks around and certain organizations around so we can continue to do the work that's necessary.
Good, thanks. Okay, so there's one question that people have been asking about, kind of looking to the future, or not necessarily the future, but about, it's a policy question, but I think it's beyond policy, which is, what is there a big, bold policy question that, or demand that we should be making right now to protect Black folks, Black people's lives? Is there one, what would you think could be like the, something that's really important? Big, bold policy question or ask, or demand.
The first thing I'm gonna say is, and this goes back to something that Vanita had put in the chat. They're trying to gerrymander districts to take away the ability of Black votes. I think pushing back against any gerrymandering that takes away power from Black voters, that takes away from our communities, is something that we definitely have to do, and protect them from continuing to further incarcerate folks. And I think that's going to be another thing that we are continuing to see. I don't know, some folks saw the video in Jacksonville recently, as a person who also has just been beat up and dealt with too much crap through police, and seeing more of that done, and more and more of those money going towards those forces. Anything that we can do to continue to protect folks, I think is important. And then on a whole nother side, around like the health piece, is protecting initiatives that are supportive of Black communities. I think are going to be truly important, and that includes the Minority AIDS Initiative. But I think how in which we talk about things that are specifically supporting Black communities, being able to protect that as much as possible, while also pushing back against anything that is further policing our communities and communities close to ours.
First thing that comes to mind, this isn't like immediate because it's not like something that's great past tomorrow, but I've said it a gazillion times. If you are in this work and you are not a Medicare for all proponent, you are an unserious person as far as I'm concerned. And so while I'm content with, or I see a need to obviously protect Ryan White, I see a need for protecting some of these systems, but if we don't actually start demanding like that, actually a healthcare system is not driven by, a profit-driven, means-tested model, we will continue to suffer, right? And I also want to say too that a lot of times it gets framed, because now it's a Medicare for all bill. People think about Bernie Sanders, but it was John Conyers, who was a Black congressman, who introduced a single-payer healthcare bill for years in Congress, right? For years. And so I want us to think about that as our legacy, is, and no shade to Bernie, but it didn't originate there, right? In the last 20 years or so. So I actually think there is an effort to reintroduce a bill. Again, it's not going to pass right now, but I think we have to start in this moment where there's so many things kind of, in flux and just flat out collapsing. Why not ask for the shit that we actually need instead of, it's like, I've said this in Gazine calls too. Like, my grandfather said to me one time when I was a kid, like, I asked him for, $2 because something I wanted to buy. And he was like, well, what do you want to buy? And I told him, he said, well, how much it costs? I said, it's $5. He said, well, if you need $5, don't ask for 2, ask for 10. And and I think we have to, operate more with that in mind, than trying to just operate out of protecting what we think what we have, or what we think we can sort of get. If we don't start with the demand of what we want and then walk back from that, if we start from what we think we could get, they're gonna walk us back from that. So you might as well ask for what you want on the front end.
Dominique, anything come to mind?
I think specifically right now, what the conditions are for incarcerated people. For some reason, he's touched every ancillary component of government except the PREA Center, except these systems that are, and I don't know what the intention is, but there's something that feels very scary and unsavory there. So just ensuring that any sort of supports that are centering the humanity of incarcerated people, that we're holding the line on that, because everything feels like it's on fire at once. And sometimes the folks that people think deserve what they're getting will get left to the side. And I think that this is the time that we have to start with the folks that maybe we assume deserve what they're getting, to put them first.
Right. It's interesting that what you're all saying is it's not necessarily an HIV specific policy. It's more Black community broad-based policy that we're bringing our expertise, our history, and our people to a broader movement. And maybe that's something we should explore, is sort of what do Black people in the HIV movement, what can we bring, what we need to bring, both in collaboration, but also that might help advance some of these bigger issues that obviously affect us. But it's interesting that no one really focused on a specific HIV issue, because it's bigger than that now. And I think that's something we need to be thinking about in terms of, if we're going to have a big, bold ask, that it's obviously has to include HIV, but other things as well. So we have about 3 minutes left. Rather than ask another question, wondering if people have any final comments, thoughts running through your head before we say goodbye to folks. You don't have to, but you can. Well, Max.
Yeah. One of the things I did want to add, and this is going to this piece around, like I saw the question around the zip codes, and like what kind of conversations are needed to, get some of the younger generations involved. I think one of the things is, we used to use zip codes like years ago, even going back to the work I did in Chicago. I think we can assess the data, understand where it's impacted more, and focus that around it. But I think it is not enough for us to just, try to do it subversively. We have to call out as like, oh, these zip codes are disproportionately more Black people are. There's also, as people seen, we disproportionately seen people that look like us be the ones that are getting let go at these different organizations. I think checking in with those people is very important. Having protections, having community town halls, as Kenyon also has said, like they had done on the research side, but doing that with local clinics, with regular folks. I think those are some of the most important things, and an important thing to do continue this summer of advocacy, as we continue to make sure that and hold these legislators accountable. And I understand that this is a long fight. This is not a short fight. It's not something that is just going to end this year or next year or even the year after that. It is important to continue to galvanize our people while we are continuing moving on, but also continuing to keep our foots on the necks of those that are making the decisions, and understanding the way that we do that is actually by continuing engaging them and doing it in a strategic way while continuing to build together. And I think that's important, and continue to have spaces like this is what is necessary for us to be able to do it.
Yeah, great. Okay, 1 minute. Anybody else? And well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Dominique, Kenyon, and Max, for a great conversation. And today's on, and we're all thinking about her. Keep in touch with us. You can find United We Rise. We'll have these conversations every month. So look in you'll get it if you registered here, you'll get in your email a reminder of the next ones. And you can always find out more of us. Keep in touch at everyblackbody.org, and all of the social media. We're Every Black Body there as well. So thank you all, and have a great rest of the. Well, not. Well, I think we're here one more time this summer. So, but